How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of What's Up With. I'm your host, Andrew Cogswell, and this is the show where we talk about the history, lore, and much, much more of all your favorite pop culture topics. Now, the last two episodes have all been about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so we're going to break with that like I promised we would last episode, and we're going to talk about something completely different. We're not going to talk about movies. We're not going to talk about comics. We're not going to talk about any of that. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a video game. doing a throwback to the Games Will show. We're going to be talking about video games. Most specifically, we're going to be talking about one video game in particular, Final Fantasy 15, which, when this video comes out, will have come out yesterday. It's still 2 days away from me in past time, and I'm so excited. I can't wait to play it. So future me, I hope you're enjoying it. Now, you might be wondering, Andrew, that's really weird. Why would you do a What's Up With on Final Fantasy 15? The game just came out. What's the big deal? There's nothing that special about it. And you would be wrong, friend. There's something very special about Final Fantasy 15 in that it was a hot mess in development. So we're going to kind of talk about what the hell happened. Why did this game take 10 years to come out? And what do we know about it so far? So the first thing we're going to talk about is plot, what we know before the game comes out, which isn't a whole lot, but we're going to go over the very basic. And the majority of this video is going to be about the development hell of Final Fantasy 15, what this game went through to come out, and it's quite a doozy. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about the expanded universe, all the different media that comes with Final Fantasy 15, including the game itself. So there we go, that's what we're going to do. Let's get started. Final Fantasy 15 takes place on the planet of Eos, which is divided up into 7 different countries. At the beginning of the game, one of the countries, Niflheim, controls almost every other country. They're kind of a warmonger. The only country they don't control is Lucis. Lucis is where the majority of the events are going to take place because our main character Noctis is the Prince of Lucis. Now, Lucis is the most magically enhanced city on the planet. They're the only one that still has their magical crystal, which provides them the source of magic. All the other countries at one point also had a magic crystal, but they were either taken away, lost, or destroyed. So Lucis is the last one. Now, right at the beginning of this game, Lucis is attacked by Niflheim in a fake peace treaty agreement, and their crystal is taken, destroying their source of magic. The game is going to focus on Noctis, Prince of Lucis, as he attempts to recover the magic crystal for his country and defeat Niflheim. Now, side note, at the beginning of the game, after this invasion, Prince Noctis, his dad King Regis, and his fiancée Lunafreya are all thought to be dead, which is good for Noctis because it gives him the element of surprise. Now, the reason that people think they're dead is because Noctis was actually out of the city when the events took place. Nobody really knew that. King Regis was in the heat of it and might actually be dead, and Lunafreya was in the heat of it as well, but it managed to escape, but nobody knew that. So from trailers and gameplay, we've seen Noctis and 3 of his friends travel across the country in her car. He's looking for Lunafreya and also for the crystal, so that's gonna be really the focus of the game. Now that we've kind of gone over the general plot, let's talk about the development, how this game went through to get released. It is a long story. I'm gonna try to condense it down as much as possible and make it really digestible for you guys, though. Now, back in 2006, Square Enix announced this ambitious project to do a kind of mini-series for Final Fantasy called Fabula Nova Crystallis, which was going to include 3 games, then the games being Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy Agito 13, and Final Fantasy Versus 13. Now, the only one of those games to actually be released with that name is Final Fantasy 13. Final Fantasy Agito 13 eventually turned into Final Fantasy Type 0, which was released on PSP in Japan, and eventually an HD remake came out on the PS4 and Xbox One in America last year. And then Final Fantasy Versus 13 is what we now know as Final Fantasy 15. Eventually, Square Enix decided to bump it up. So all these games were supposed to come out on the PlayStation 3, but only one of them actually did, and once again, that's Final Fantasy 13. Like I said, Type 0 came out on the PSP, and 15 is now going to come out on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. There wasn't a lot of information released during this time period, and a lot of fans actually started to believe the game was vaporware because they hadn't heard much about it. They thought the game had been canceled, and Square Enix just didn't tell anyone. Now, the exciting thing for the Versus 13 announcement was Tetsuya Nomura, who is a legendary Square Enix employee, was announced as the director. He'd worked on many Final Fantasy games, including Final Fantasy 7, and did the character design for fan favorites Cloud and Sephiroth for that game. He's also been the director for every single Kingdom Hearts game, including all the crazy spin-offs, and there's like 80 of those. So the dude's got a reputation. Now, you can see Nomura's influence in the game still because of the combat system. It's more of a Kingdom Hearts action style system instead of the traditional turn-based slower mechanics that we're used to in Final Fantasy games, so his stamp is definitely on the game. Now, as progress on the game continued, they realized the story was getting too big and they just wanted to make it its own game instead of putting it in with the series of Final Fantasy 13. So they rebranded it as Final Fantasy 15, the next main series game in the series. When Final Fantasy Versus 13 was rebranded in 2013 as Final Fantasy 15, the game was only about 20-25% done, so in 7 years they'd only done about a fifth to a fourth of the game, which is insane. One of the big things that happened right before the rebrand was the game got a new co-director. In Final Fantasy Type 0 director Hajime Tabata. Now, Tabata worked together with Nomura for a few years before Nomura left in 2014 to go work on other projects, namely Kingdom Hearts 3, finally, and the Final Fantasy VII HD remake. Now, with this change from Final Fantasy Versus 13 to Final Fantasy 15, some elements were lost, namely the character of Stella, who would later be replaced with Luna Freya, and also the concept of being able to control each party member individually, which had been a staple in the Final Fantasy series for years, really broken up at Final Fantasy 12. Now, another big reason for the delay between the staff changes and the rebranding was moving the game from 7th generation, namely PS3, which was an exclusive for, to the 8th generation, which for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. When the developers saw, like, hey, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One can do way more, it's gonna be way stronger, and the PlayStation 3 is gonna be obsolete at the point of release, why would we release the game on PlayStation 3? We're already selling it during an irrelevant time. So they had to move the game from the old 7th generation engine that ran on PlayStation 3 and use a new engine for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So that took a lot of extra work. There was also some story rewrites that happened, including getting rid of Stella and bringing in Luna Freya and stuff like that. So the game got shuffled around quite a bit. Now, the official rebranding of Final Fantasy 15 from Final Fantasy Versus 13 was during E3 2013, so about 7 years after announcement. The first demo and the first chance for really common gamers to get a chance to play the combat system didn't happen until March 2015, when a demo was released with day one editions of Final Fantasy Type 0 HD called Episcode du Sky. Now, everyone who didn't buy Type 0 HD got locked out of the demo, but they did eventually release a demo for everyone in March 2016. March 2016 was also when they finally announced all the details about the game, including the extended universe, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and the release date, which also has some controversy with it. The announcement on March 30th, 2016 was a huge event put on by Square Enix in LA. It was hosted by Kind of Funny's Greg Miller and Tim Geddes, who Tim is a big fan of the series, and Greg was a newcomer. He's not a huge fan of the series, and that's what Square has been kind of trying to pitch this whole time with this game, is it's for diehard Final Fantasy fans and newcomers alike. So it was cool to see them really embrace that. During the event, we got the announcement that there was going to be a full-length animated movie called Kingsglaive, with voice acting by Lena Headey and Sean Bean from Game of Thrones and Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad and BoJack Horseman. Kingsglaive was going to focus on the beginning of Final Fantasy 15 and kind of set up the series, but we'll talk about that more a little bit later. The really big thing that happened at the event, though, was the release date. It was finally confirmed. It wasn't, oh, it's coming this year, oh no, it's coming next year, oh no, like there was a solid release date for the first time, and that was September 30th, 2016. But wait, it's November, and I had said earlier that the game came out yesterday, so what the hell? Are you recording this super early? No. Square Enix decided just for one more time, just for old time's sake, we're going to delay the game 2 months. Finally, we're going to talk about the expanded universe. This is the first time a Final Fantasy game has gotten an expanded universe at launch. Final Fantasy VII most notably has had spin-off games and a movie and an anime and stuff like that, but that came out years later. This game, though, is getting support before the game even comes out with Final Fantasy Kingsglaive, which is an excellent animated film. If you're interested in the game at all, I'd highly recommend watching it. They're bringing some of the cutscenes into the game to kind of clear some stuff up, but it really sets up the story and the environment really well. I'd highly recommend going and watching it. They also did a 4-part anime series called Brotherhood Final Fantasy 15 that focuses on the 4 main characters, Noctis and his 3 friends, and really gives them more backstory and more substance to their character before you start the game. The last 2 extended universe things were actually mobile games. One is already out and one is coming out. The one that's out is called Justice Monsters 5. It's a pinball-esque game that actually exists in the Final Fantasy 15 game that Noctis and his friends play, but you can play it on your mobile phone, your tablet, all that stuff. It's fun, it's fine. It doesn't add any lore to the game, so if you're looking for that, you don't need to play it. And the other game that hasn't come out yet is actually an MMO that's going to be for smartphones. There's not a whole lot of information about it yet, so keep an eye out for that. We'll probably talk about some trending at some point. So that's it. That's Final Fantasy 15 in a nutshell. From the general plot to what the hell happened with this game, why did it take so damn long, to everything that's going on with it at launch. Check out my review. It's going to be out sometime next week. This game's supposed to be a little bit bulkier than other games we review, so it might take a little bit longer, but I'm going to try to pump it out as fast as possible. I'm really excited to play it. I'm probably playing it right now as you're watching this. Like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. Are you playing Final Fantasy 15? Do you not care about it? Are you waiting for Christmas? Have you never played a Final Fantasy game before? If you shouldn't, you should play Final Fantasy 9. It's a fucking gem. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Check out the boardroom later this week and subtrending a little bit after that, and wait for my review on Final Fantasy 15 next week. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.